Here's a little twist on our usual type of story. In this case, finding the treasure was the first thing that happened. But then nobody believed it was real. No one, that is, except Ralph and Ian. Ralph Cook Jr. and Ian McCarthy are best friends who both live and work on the island of Nantucket off Cape Cod. Ian had recently discovered he had a distant relative who was one of the survivors of the most famous shipwreck of the 20th century. It had captured his imagination, along with that of historians, writers, movie makers, and now undersea explorers who located the ship in its watery grave.
And I became very obsessed with the Titanic and began reading books and talking to everyone about the ironies in the film.
And when he heard a local antique dealer had a deck chair that was supposedly from the Titanic, well, Ian decided he just had to have it. The chair looked authentic enough. It was made of Burmese teak and had the distinctive 5-point star insignia of the White Star Line carved into the headrest. And it came with a letter from the previous owner, describing how the chair had been pulled out of the water by someone on one of the rescue ships.
The original game plan was to buy the chair, see if we could establish it as being from the Titanic, and sell it.
It seemed like if anybody's going to, do this and maybe do well at it, Ian and I could.
They bought the chair for $3,800.
We didn't know what to do with it when we first got it. Is it something you should keep in a safe, or is it something you keep in your house? And so we would keep it in my closet, in my living room.
The next day we went and called Sotheby's, and they stressed upon us the importance of provenance, provenance, provenance.
The provenance establishes an object's authenticity by documenting its history in writing with verifiable facts. Museums, collectors, and auction galleries will not buy or sell an artifact like the deck chair without an acceptable provenance. Ian and Ralph knew they would have to do much better than the letter.
If you have the documentation, it could be worth a lot of money, maybe more than $100,000. And once we heard the news that it could be in that ballpark, we decided we had to go to Halifax and try to build a case. We flew from Nantucket to the Cape, rented a car, and drove 13 hours to Halifax.
Halifax, Nova Scotia. This was the port closest to where the Titanic sank, from where rescue ships set sail to pick up the hundreds of bodies that were reported floating in the sea. The White Star Line chartered 2 cable ships for the job. The first to depart was the Mackie Bennett, equipped with undertakers, coffins, and embalming fluid. According to the letter which came with the chair, it was on one of these ships that Jean Lemateleur, the captain of a French cable repair ship, fished the chair from the cold waters of the Atlantic. Ian and Ralph's first stop was the Maritime Museum in Halifax.
We went right to the chair that they had because they have a Titanic deck chair. So, matter of fact, the sign says they have the only Titanic deck chair in the world.
And our first reaction was, wow, it's the same as our chair.
There's the White Star mark.
But upon looking at it closer, we realized that there were some subtle differences. For example, the seat is a cane seat in their chair, and ours has wooden slats. And we noticed the way the footrest connected together, and instantly we had this sinking feeling in our stomach that what if all the chairs in the Titanic were made this way? Then it would kind of rule out our chair. So we regrouped, we went up to the library, and we found a picture of the chairs on the Titanic stacked up. We had a magnifying glass, and we were able to show very clearly that there were many different varieties of deck chairs visible in this photograph, and that was our first hurdle that we overcame.
We asked them about the captain, and they said, listen, that captain that you're talking about has never been in Halifax during the time of the Titanic sinking. Well, that was a sinking blow to our whole account. If the man wasn't even in Halifax, how could he have collected this chair from the Titanic?
We were going to find out if that was true or not, so we went to the Public Archives building to see if they had a city directory. And very quickly we were able to find that the captain was listed here from 1906 onwards. And then, I think Ralph was the one that pointed out to me, there's a sign over their chair that says, "This is the only chair in the world from the Titanic." And we started talking amongst ourselves, like, maybe they don't want there to be a second chair. So we decided that we would try to find Captain Lemateleur's will, because we figured that person might be around who would have pieces to the puzzle. So we went to the Registry of Wills here in Halifax.
And in his will, he had left everything to a Margaret Bullcoats.
But as hard as they tried, they couldn't find any Margaret Buchholz.
We tried all directories and all kinds of fancy footwork to find her, and we couldn't find her.
Having reached a dead end, they were leaving town when they realized what they did have was Captain Lamatelure's last address.
Not far from here at Cemetery, huh?
We went to the street where the captain had lived, and we said if we could find an older person that might remember him, maybe we could get information.
So we began knocking on doors on the street. Everyone pretty much said they didn't know him, but we found one old woman who said, "Oh, the captain was a dear neighbor of mine. Please come in." She had an employee named Margaret, who was a housekeeper, and when the captain's sister died, he was all alone. She sent Margaret over to take care of the captain.
And we said, was that woman named Margaret Buchholz? And she said to us, well, Margaret Buchholz was her maiden name, but she's married now, and her name's Margaret Pennington.
Ian and Ralph were so excited, they drove immediately to the small town outside Halifax, where Margaret Pennington was living.
And I took out a picture of the chair. She goes, "I know that chair, I know that chair. That chair was from the Titanic."
The captain used to keep the chair in the garage. And I said to him, "Captain, why don't you take the chair and put it in the garbage? It's no good to us." He's always said, "Oh, no, that's from the Titanic. I gotta hold on to it. It's very sentimental, you know, I retrieved it."
And Ralph and I just looked at each other and we were like, home run.
Now Ralph and Ian had independent verification of the letter. The trip to Halifax had paid off.
So we were going home completely joyous and happy, and when we got to Nantucket, we went straight to the Nantucket newspaper and we said, "Boy, have we got a story for you."
We're opening the paper thinking, this is it. They're going to say, you know, we have found an amazing discovery. But instead, they said the alleged chair from the Titanic. And we asked them, why didn't you say it's the chair?
And their answer kept coming back saying, well, if they cannot establish the captain on a ship in the ocean in 1912, they really still can't prove that that chair was from the Titanic.
So we're like, okay, we're going to find it, you know?
So we went to Halifax for a second time. This time we flew. And when we got to Halifax, we went to the archives and we were told that the newspapers kept a merchant marine log which recorded the movements of all the ships in and out of the harbor.
And we tried to find out if they knew anything about, you know, his ship, the Contra Admiral Cabet, which was the ship in Lloyd's Register that he was the captain of.
We began looking for the correct dates. We started in early in 1912 and went every day through the entire year. And to our extreme dismay, we found that the captain's ship, the Contra Admiral Cabet, was listed as being in Halifax Harbor every single day of 1912. So we were saying to ourselves, how could he possibly recover a chair if his ship never left the harbor? The records for the French cable company, which employed Captain Lamatelure, were returned to Paris at World War II.
Ian and Ralph steadfastly believed Captain Lamatelure had pulled the chair from the water. They needed to prove his ship was out there, and now their only hope was the ship's log. And that was in Paris, in the archive of the French cable company that owned the ship. But they hadn't come this far in order to turn back.
So we decided to go to Paris. At this point, we were starting to feel a little bit of pressure from our wives about the money and the time we were putting into this.
Our wives this time are going with us because they're not about to stay home anymore for trips that we're going to go on.
So I packed up my wife and my 6-month-old son and Ralph and his pregnant wife, and we flew to Paris on a Friday evening.
They planned on giving themselves 4 days to do the research, but when they arrived at the archive, they discovered not only was it closed on the weekend, but that Monday was a holiday. That gave them a single day, Tuesday, to find the evidence they needed. Returning to the archive on Tuesday morning, Ian and Ralph are hit with yet another roadblock.
Upon getting there, we were told that we could not go in because we did not have credentials.
But someone overheard and offered to help, a professional researcher, who then escorted them inside and even helped with the research. With their new French friend, Daniel Coton, they went right to work.
I didn't read French, but I could follow the dates. And I noticed that under the word navire, which is boat, it kept saying the name Mackie Bennett, Mackie Bennett, Mackie Bennett.
What we learned is because their ship is broken down, so the company had to rent a foreign ship. And that was a big clue to us.
So the Mackie Bennett was actually working for the French cable company. But where did that put Captain Le Matelure?
Well, we got very excited because we knew that Mackie Bennett was the best ship that we could have found out he was linked to. So we said, how can we find the cable repair documents that these things are referring to? They said, well, they're in another archive in Paris.
They only had a few hours left, and the new archive was on the other side of town.
So we go to this place. They say, what do you want? We tell them what we want, what record we're looking for.
And he said, well, it's 4 o'clock and we're going to be closing pretty soon.
Now, time is of the essence because our plane's leaving.
We opened them up and we couldn't help but think, nobody has touched these books in 86 years. We start flipping through the pages and we happened upon the log, which is called Particulars of Repair, that is written in English by the British commander of the Mackie Bennett.
And right on the top line it says, Captain Julian Le Matelure on board the Mackie Bennett. And that was it. That put our captain in the ship during the time of the Titanic sinking.
I think we jumped up in the middle of a no-talking archive and did a high five and maybe a shriek.
Now they had proven beyond any doubt the chair was genuine, documenting its journey each step of the way, from being plucked out of the North Atlantic by a French ship captain, all the way to an antique shop in Nantucket.
By the time we came back from Paris, between all of our traveling, long-distance telephone calls and everything, we were probably into the whole thing for about $20,000.
I mean, we're not wealthy people, Ian and I, so if it was something that was going to come out of it, you know, that was good, I mean, that would be very good for us.
Everyone around us was saying, oh, you're going to make a fortune now, the chair's worth a fortune.
Well, maybe not a fortune, but it did turn out to be worth more than anyone thought. While Ralph and Ian look for a buyer, they are leasing the chair to the RMS Titanic exhibit in Orlando, Florida, where it's on display in its very own room. Appraised for $500,000, the chair has already returned more than their investment.
The idea of finding a chair and maybe it's valuable, well, nothing wrong with that. So my idea was, well, we lose, we lose. We win, we win. You know, we just try it.